Welcome back to the Talking to Grandma podcast. I'm producer Beck, and today's episode is a very special live recording from South by Southwest EDU. In today's episode, we take the conversation far beyond artificial intelligence as a tech trend. We will explore deeper questions. What wisdom exists within our communities? What happens when technology is built without cultural memory? And how do we make sure AI expands humanity instead of replacing it? Our host, Dr. Veronica Benavides, was joined by an incredible panel. Dr. Shauna Knox, founder of the Emancipation Group, Carlos Moreno, co-executive director of Big Picture Learning, and Dr. Cesar Cruz, community scholar, activist, and co-founder of Homies Empowerment in East Oakland. Together, they unpacked the relationship between ancestral intelligence, education, storytelling, liberation, language preservation, and the future of AI in our classrooms and communities. I had the pleasure of experiencing this episode in the audience at South by Southwest EDU in Austin, Texas, and I can honestly say this felt less like a panel discussion and more like a spiritual moment. So whether you're a parent, educator, student, or someone trying to navigate this rapidly changing world without losing your humanity in the process, I think this episode will really stick with you. So let's get into it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Talking to Grandma podcast. Welcome to the folks in the room live at South by Southwest and also the folks listening at home. We are very excited for today's conversation. My name is Dr. Veronica Benavides, and I am the founder of Bilingual Generation and the host of the podcast. Talking to Grandma is a weekly podcast where we elevate stories, science, and strategies to help families and educators raise multilingual children. The name comes from a simple but powerful idea that language isn't just about vocabulary or grammar, it's about connection. It's about making sure that children can talk with their grandparents, understand family stories, and stay connected to cultures that shape them. And in many ways, that's the heart of today's conversation. Because when we talk about language, storytelling, and culture, we're really talking about something bigger. How knowledge travels across generations, and how wisdom is passed down, preserved, and reimagined. Today's conversation feels especially timely because we're living through a moment of rapid technological change. Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping education, how students learn, how teachers plan, how knowledge is produced. Yet conversations about AI often center efficiency, automation, and technical capability while overlooking deeper questions about wisdom, values, and cultural knowledge. So this session invites educators to widen the frame, and we're going to be calling on Ruha Benjamin's book and her call for abolitionist tools for the new Jim Code. And in that, we reflect her questions of how do we ensure that emerging technologies do not reproduce the inequities of the past? What wisdom already exists within our communities that can guide ethical innovation? And how can educators cultivate students' imagination so they see technology not just as something to consume, but as something to reshape and shape responsibly? To help us answer these questions, we have amazing guests. We have Dr. Shauna Knox, the founder and CEO of the Emancipation Group, a Black-led innovation studio building technology that enables Black children and families to achieve intergenerational wealth through the Emancipation Game, a web-based mathematics platform that teaches higher-order math through global Black history and open-source RAG middleware designed to eliminate bias in AI tutoring at the infrastructure level. A decolonial curriculum theorist, former U.S. Department of Education portfolio manager, and published Routledge scholar, she co-chairs the UN Permanent Forum for People of African Descent Working Group and approaches the design of technology as an act of intellectual sovereignty for Black communities. Can we get a round of applause for Dr. Shauna Knox in the house? Yes. We also have with us Carlos Moreno, who is a co-executive director of Big Picture Learning and author of Finding Your Leadership Soul, where he champions love, care, and vulnerability as core leadership practices in education. Across a global network of schools, he works to ensure technology expands and does not replace young people's humanity and imagination. A round of applause for Carlos.
Come on, Carlos.
And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Cesar Cruz, a Mexican community scholar, activist, theologian, and co-founder of Homies Empowerment in East Oakland, whose 34 years of grassroots work rooted in liberation theology, Mexica Mayan cosmology, and decolonial framework serves over 20,000 people annually through education, urban farming, and mutual aid. A barrio-trained educator pursuing his second doctorate at Pacific School of Religion, Dr. Cruz weaves together interfaith spirituality, womanist and mujerista theology, and the living practice of active hope as embodied collective resistance. Thank you, Dr. Cesar Cruz. Okay, and I am just a facilitator of the amazing brilliance here we have in the room with us today, and I want to start with Shauna. Shauna, you're building the Emancipation Group, a Black-led innovation studio that leverages technology, including artificial intelligence, to center and support Black learners. Why is it important for Black leaders, community members, and students to be the architects of new technology, including artificial intelligence?
That's such a great question, Vero, and thank you so much for having me. I want to start by saying that the most robustly documented lever for educational attainment for Black students is culturally responsive learning. So it's not a nice to have, it is a need to have. And I love that we're grounding our framing in Ruha Benjamin, because she talks about making sure we're not looking at existing social cleavages and either perpetuating them or exacerbating them. So just on a very fundamental level, if we didn't want to transpose the issues that are happening in a classroom into a digital context, then we would have to interrupt the way we built that digital context. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the way the classroom was built, right, for Black students specifically, it was built so that we'd be receptacles of knowledge that had nothing to do with us, and to train us into manual labor and factory work so that we would not think, but that we'd comply. It's been effective for such a task. If we wanted to see it do something else, then I don't really want anyone else doing that for us. I'd like for us to do that for ourselves. And so that means that we have to embrace a fierce interdisciplinarity in the way that our communities exist in general. We all come together, somebody makes the rice, somebody makes the chicken, somebody makes the potato salad. That's how we function. In this case, we need economists who have been thinking about our communities and what our needs are, what it would look like to build a world that we want to see. Ruha calls that social imaginaries. That's it. We need to be thinking about the future that we want to see and building that together. And so the digital context is not any different from that. In a very clear way, in a very accessible way, someone had an agenda for what schools would do, and then they created schools to produce that outcome. We have an agenda, right, for what we'd like this technology to do. And so we need to build the data into that technology that would enable that reality. So that when a student's interfacing with that technology and they think, oh, we're all in a classroom, I'm here with Tad, we're all using this learning tool, it's just going to tell us an answer that's true. Just like you open a book, you think you're gonna just get an answer that's true. But that has actually not been accurate. Sometimes the book is not telling the whole truth. And similarly, sometimes the technology is actually just lying in a ridiculous way. And right now we have an opportunity to work on the infrastructure, to change the pipes before the cement is poured. So it's a really critical time for us to be in the infrastructure building work. Even if our knowledge of AI is nascent and emerging, one thing we know is what it feels like when something has not been built well for the outcomes that we want. Right. So that should be enough of an impetus for us to be like, we will be the architects of this, we will do it together, and we will make sure that what goes into the nutrition facts of this food will produce the kind of health that we want for our children.
Yeah, I love that, the building the pipes before the cement is poured really at the root of it. And I think about that so much of sometimes when I've like been working in organizations where you are the person that's trying to like push social justice efforts or social change, and it feels like it's going nowhere, and you're like, actually, the roots of this are deep, and they're not really able to change at this point. And so you're trying to look ahead of that into the future and make sure that our roots are grounded. Carlos, I'm curious to know how you're entering this conversation, given your perspective of leading a network of schools and looking at AI's role in that, artificial intelligence role in that, and how we might use abundant imagination in addition to ancestral intelligence in order to shape what that foundation looks like.
I absolutely love that framing around abundant imagination. I think that's a beautiful capturing of what we should be doing when we talk about schools and young people. And wanted to start off by also just really reframing this notion around AI being this thing, artificial intelligence, AI, being this thing that's going to shape and transform education, right? Because it is not informing and building itself, right? It is being built by the stories that we tell it. So if the stories that we continue to feed the world is that that's what it's going to be and the future is going to be shaped by AI, that is absolutely what it's going to become. Versus having a conversation and talking about artificial intelligence as something that will help us like augment a young person's opportunity to learn, to exist, to be in this world. And I feel like there's a very important role, a critical role that educators and education leaders need to play in that as we tell that narrative and tell that story, really shift it differently. So as you know, part of an organization that works very closely with schools and school systems around the country, you know, we're grounded in really three what we believe are simple principles around relationships, relevance, and rigor, right? Where our young people have an opportunity to be supported by an adult that remains with them throughout their entire journey. And it's not just around supporting a young person for the sake of how they perform academically. It's around really knowing a young person holistically. It's about knowing their communities, knowing their families, knowing their histories, and supporting a young person and also excavating that, right? The knowledge of self will lead us to a place where then a young person can be free, right? And also begin to see what's possible. When we talk about relevance, the opportunity for a young person to explore passions, interests, opportunities in a variety of fields within their community and even beyond their immediate community, you know, through an internship, through an apprenticeship, where they're working alongside physicians, attorneys, mechanics, social activists, people in local government, right, where they can see what might be possible and they start actually reflecting and having that opportunity and say, hey, I can imagine myself in this space, right? There's a space for me. And there are people from my community that are doing tremendous work that come from where I come from, have had similar and same lived experiences. And that's a very important reframing, I think, for a young person in their experience. And then when we talk about rigor, right, in addition to your more conventional forms of assessment, we also think it's super powerful when a young person can publicly present and even defend their learning, talk about who they are as a learner, as a young person, as a human, while also coupling that with the ability to talk about their connection to what they're doing in the real world. What are the problems that they're trying to solve in the real world that are affecting their community? And then also then field and receive questions and support on how to continue to go deeper in that learning. So for us, it's just, I think there are models of this, and that's not exclusive to only big picture, right? There are lots of models of these. Sadly, sometimes they're entirely too siloed. And what we need to do is continue to show that type of abundant imagination is absolutely possible and quite beautiful.
Thank you. That is powerful. And I wanna bring Cesar into the conversation. And for our listeners at home, we need to narrate what we're seeing too so that they can be along in the journey. So I see you writing notes, Cesar, and I see you lighting some Palo Santo as well. So invite us into what you're thinking right now and how you're entering this conversation.
It's a tough city to be at. You know, it's named after someone who wanted to make the whole country a country for slavery. That's Austin. I was at UT Austin yesterday, and the professors received news from the regents that they're not allowed to speak about anything controversial. Our lives are now controversial. The students asked me about South by Southwest, and they're like, oh, is that conference where they do a big commercial for AI? And isn't AI destroying the earth? And then isn't some AI companies funding genocide? So how am I entering the conversation? So many mixed feelings. Our people are getting picked up by ICE. We're dealing with like bombings in Iran, the destruction of Palestina, and we're going to talk about AI, right? And so I'm going to rebuke artificial, and I'm going to talk about abuelas, if that's all right.
Dale.
Please.
And so I remember when I graduated, and I was all proud of myself. Según yo, I got myself a little degree. I went to UC Berkeley, and I came home to Jalisco, Mexico, and I told my abuelito about my degree. And my abuelito was like, mijo, did they teach you about love? No. Did they teach you how to grow your own food? No. Did they teach you how to build a house? No. Did they teach you anything? And then me quedé like stuck. And then he's like, esa escuela te dejó requete pendejo.
Hay que traducirlo.
And I felt humiliated because I was chasing the trinkets of this society and the knowledge that this society offers. And I realized that to my elder, I hadn't learned a thing, and that stayed with me. I've been in education now 34 years. It stayed with me. And then later, my abuelita would tell me stories that my mom was deported on 3 different occasions. And my mom was able to make it to my high school graduation. My mom's alive and well. I hope you're listening to Mama, and I hope you're proud. But my mom was telling me that my abuelita shared with her to stop focusing on 20-foot borders, that we carry invisible 21-foot ladders. And when my jefita gave me my 21-foot ladder, I've been carrying that sucker ever since. That's why I'm here. And so what AI is our 21-foot ladder for 20-foot borders. And what it looks like at Homies Empowerment in East Oakland, California, is in everything we do. So when we do physical education, we had to hide our cultura in capoeira and in Filipino martial arts in eskrima. And so we share our culture through physical movement. And then we do mathematics through making ojos de Dios, eyes of God, because we're doing geometry, we're doing XY equations. And now what we're doing is we're partnering with places like Pacifica Radio that have analog speeches of all of our movement leaders that have never been digitized. Imagine if we could digitize Malcolm X in such a way where when you're going through stuff and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you want to kill yourself and you want to hurt yourself, Malcolm shows up in a voice and says, mijo. Well, it probably won't say mijo, that's my grandma. But Malcolm be like, I can't channel Malcolm, but like Malcolm be like, son, we got a lot to fight for. They killed me at 39. I got some stuff I need to tell you because our mental health is shot these days because we're being attacked left and right. And so I think we do have to tap into AI. It's the ancestral intelligence within, and we have to make sure we manifest it. When our young people go study science on the land, it's called horticulture, and we have plant cesters. We have ancestors that are plant relatives, and we could learn so much from this mycelium underground network that takes care of other trees. We have so much to learn from Mother Earth, so much to learn from our abuelas, but our audience may not even know their grandmother's name from 7 generations ago because they cut off our histories by design. And so please don't tell me that our intelligence is artificial. I'm not going to get it from ChatGPT. We're making billionaires and trillionaires off of this stuff, and I think we need to tap into that ancestral wisdom within. That's all I got.
Right, yeah. That's incredibly powerful, and I think elevates the tension that I often feel as a mother, as an educator, as a Chicana, as a woman in the world of like, how much do we try to shape and build the foundation of artificial intelligence, and how much do we not go that path, right? How much do we stay connected to the land, to analog, to different ways of doing things? And maybe it's not a dichotomy. It feels like a dichotomy in me. I want to pass it back to you, Shauna, because your work is grounded in liberation. And you started this conversation with, it's important for us to be the architects and to build the foundations. So how are you thinking about this tension, some of the very important things that Cesar named in terms of us being a product in, when we're using ChatGPT, the environmental impact, what's taken away from us when we're turning towards, quote unquote, artificial intelligence rather than the people in front of us. So how are you making sense of this? How do you approach this?
Yeah, I appreciate what you're asking, and I think you're leaning into where I tend to sit on this, which is not to embrace a false dichotomy. I think dichotomies are usually reductionist, and they're about control. And they're about thinking that you might have control that we don't have, right? We just went through COVID, and one of the things that we needed was you needed to behave in a certain way, but then we all collectively needed to behave in a certain way, and it became really clear that where control fails, cooperation is needed. And I think that cooperatively, there are some realities that we just have to address. And I think what's really important in what Cesar said is that memory is critical. And because cognitive load theory requires us to recall information in order to strengthen our thinking pathways, there are ways that we are literally remembering less because of our leaning into this technology. And so there is existing knowledge that we can use to determine how we can responsibly use the technology. And that shouldn't prevent us from finding ways to use this powerful tool to accomplish things we were already fighting for. And so if we can find ways to use AI not to delete our memories, but to restore memories of our grandmothers to 7 generations ago, then that to me is well worth that engagement. And so I think there's the question of how to do things responsibly, and I think it's what are we holding when we do them? Right. What are our priorities that we're holding? And if we are holding that our memories are important, that our ability to think not just procedurally and operationally, but conceptually is important. And we think about how do you shape a mind over time toward deep conceptual understanding of the world around you, a literacy of that. I think if we think about it as not just relapsing into the tool, but how the tool supports us building the world that we want, I think it becomes an asset to us. And I think that we have to think deeply about the environment. I'm from the part of the world that's most impacted by the decisions of really thoughtless, selfish, and greedy corporations that are taking out entire regions of people, that they won't ever experience the full consequences of their decisions, but my region, the Caribbean, will. And so there's absolutely, we need to think about how all technologies, AI included, makes that reality worse for people who are not even making the decisions that are impacting them. But I think it's not one of those conversations that should be a mic drop comment. It actually is a sustained and ongoing and iterative conversation in which everyone should accept that something that you thought might be helpful might be wrong. Right. And then returning to that and sustaining that commitment to building the world that we want to live in and the one that we want to leave for our children.
Beautiful. We have a lot of listeners that are classroom teachers and parents of young children. So I want to think about what Shauna said in terms of continuing and sustaining the conversation, grappling with this and rejecting the dichotomy in the classroom and as a parent. So Carlos, if you have any recommendations, how are you navigating artificial intelligence, the balance with ancestral intelligence, and abundant imagination, and how can they live in harmony, how sometimes they may go against each other? What's your perspective from that classroom and family perspective?
That's an unfair question, Vero. But I appreciate it nonetheless. I'll start off by saying immediately is that even though we are an organization that is deeply grounded in the communities in which we serve, and care deeply about the histories and experiences of young people, we have a platform that is AI powered, right? That helps young people identify powerful learning experiences outside of the school. And that has been a powerful tool and will continue to be a powerful tool and I do think that we as an organization still feel that deep responsibility of using it responsibly.
So how do you elevate that for your students who are using it? Because young kids are using AI in almost everything, whether they know it or whether they don't. When they're consuming AI-generated content, or if they're interacting with the tool that you have, which is AI-powered, like how do you build that critical consciousness in your students as both the leader of big picture learning, but like your teachers in the classroom when they're facilitating the usage of that tool?
Absolutely. We just don't start with that tool. The key is that the tool is exactly that, a tool to help support the learning. So when our young people are engaging in our schools and with the adults in the schools, the technology is absolutely secondary or even tertiary, right? It is about the unpacking of their own histories before we talk about the tools and utilizing the tools like Blaze. It is about talking about those histories and those things and engaging the families in those conversations. So it's not like, hey, we care about you and what your experiences are, but let's bring in those folks who are important to you from your community, and let's talk about your learning in that way. Let's talk about those stories that have helped bring you to this place. So I think it will continue to be this tension that we experience, but do believe that with the importance of AI being here is that we continue to, as I shared at the opening, is that we are continuing to have educators and education leaders also be part of the narrative developers of how this can be used and should be used responsibly. I'll also share that one of the things that we've been intentionally doing is, without using tech and AI in your more conventional ways, is hosting and convening spaces like a leadership journeys, right? Or something that allows folks to not centered around technology or AI, but really talking about the humanity of this work, right? What are those things that have led us to be the servants that we are for the communities that we care deeply about? And I think it's just going to continue to be this ongoing journey for us and for all of us in this work.
Yeah, ongoing indeed. And I think the dialogue and the conversation is so important. I want to ask a closing question for each one of y'all, and then Cesar is going to share a poem. And I want to invite the audience to already start thinking about what questions do you all have, because then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So for this last question that I have, Maya philosophy treats time as alive and cyclical, carried through multiple calendars. In many Andean frameworks, the past is conceptualized as in front, because it's visible and it's known, while the future is behind because it cannot be seen. In West African thinking, we have Sankofa, which teaches you that you must return to retrieve what was lost in order to move forward. So time is a spiral rather than linear in kind of Western thinking. What future knowledge is already calling us back through our ancestors? I invite y'all to just like think about your own cyclical knowledge that you have in your lineage. What knowing do you have that's calling us forward, Cesar?
I think where I'm contemplating this answer, because I didn't know this question was coming.
Gotta keep you on your toes.
Good. Is I'm thinking about the labels I've collected over time. And so in this society in the US, I collected a label that I'm an immigrant. But sometimes it didn't show up in that language. It showed up, eres mojado, you're a wetback, you're an illegal alien. And then I collected another label that you're first generation, first to go to college. And then I heard the word minority so much that I thought that was my middle name. But as I've been tapping into ancestral intelligence and studying where I'm from Mexico and California. That is the land of the Mexica and Uto-Aztecan languages. And what my grandmother was teaching me is that we actually didn't cross the border, but the border crossed us. And so I'm actually no one's illegal alien, and I'm not an immigrant to the Americas. I've always been home. I just don't have papeles. I've been undocumented most of my life. And when you and I went to school together, we were at the same program, just undocumented. But I'm in my ancestral homeland, it just got hijacked. Right. So I'm no one's immigrant. Second thing is, I'm not first gen because I learned about Chichen Itza and Tenochtitlan and Tikal and Machu Picchu, and just because I don't know my grandmother's name from 7 generations ago, it doesn't mean she didn't go to a university of higher learning. I'm just first gen because I'm ignorant to my own history. So I rebuke that term. And I'm no one's minority, I've just been minoritized all of my life. So everything I know about me has been what Dr. Valenzuela calls subtractive schooling. The more time I spend in they schools, like Dead Prez would say, the more gets taken from me. My history, my heroes, my culture, my pride, my language, my roots. I'm speaking to you in English from England. Y te voy a hablar en español de España. But I'm not that. I went from Cesar to Caesar in high school, and my homegirl Maria became Mary, because we got erased. And so when you're asking me to tap in, I have to unlearn.
Right.
I'm not an immigrant. I'm not illegal. I'm not all of these. I'm not first gen. I'm not your slave. You know, I'm not your bracero. I'm not your brazos. And it's about reclaiming who I am on our ancestral lands. That's what I got.
Right. Thanks for sharing that remembering of who we are and how we carry that forward.
Yes, indeed. I appreciate that, Cesar, and the four of us were, before coming up, we're having conversations about our places of origin and places where our families are from, and this question has prompted me to, like, I think, share something I absolutely did not plan on sharing. So, as I'm sure many of us are, I'm in a season of caring for my parents, caring for your elders. And have taken the practice that I wish I had done with my grandparents who are no longer with us, who have transitioned, of really spending the time to understand and unpack the stories of their journey. So I make it a point to, use of technology, record the conversations I have with my mother and my father, who are, 95, 88, and grateful that I have them, but also know that we are, have less time with them. And want to better understand all the things that help shape who I am, that help shape who my daughter is and who is becoming. Those things that are innate, that are informed by their stories, by their their travels, all that they have endured to be able to ensure that I can be here at South by Southwest on this amazing panel, having these types of conversations. And it makes me, and I'm proud to be able to say that it's a practice that exists in a lot of our schools, right, around having those conversations with your elders. But it wasn't one that I was practicing personally until recently, until I felt it very differently, until the time feels finite. And we don't want to get to that place where we have these reflective moments and we're like, I wish I would have. I wish I knew. I wish I could have that conversation. I wish I could understand. Or even, I don't know this part of my history. And I think it's important that we do that before we can't do that any longer.
Yes. Thank you.
This is really appropriate for the title of the Talking to Grandma. I love that. There was a mixed method study that had about 666 people in it. And they found that a lot of the cognitive offloading that's happening with people's engagement with AI is because of the frequency of use leading to them trusting the responses that were coming from the AI. So this external scaffolding is happening where instead of kind of building this muscle of self-reliance, self-concept, self-referencing, you're kind of externalizing that and allowing yourself to trust this digital medium to do that. And that's because we're social creatures.
Right.
And we're designed to trust. We just come into the room, looks like a chair, seen a chair before, I'm gonna sit. I'm not gonna test every single thing before I use it. And so I think because we know that about how we function, that it's about frequency of use that leads to trust, that we can be intentional about what we're constantly referencing so that that trust belongs inside, right? And so I am going to reference the quote that I most deeply resonate with in all of my trust. And it's a quote from Frantz Fanon, who is a philosopher, a decolonial philosopher from the Caribbean. And it says, appropriately for this moment, that man is not merely a possibility of recapture or of negation. If it is true that consciousness is a process of transcendence, we have to see too that this transcendence is haunted by the problems of love and understanding. Man is a yes that vibrates to cosmic harmonies, uprooted, pursued, baffled, doomed to watch the disillusion of the truths that he has worked out for himself, one after another. He has to give up projecting onto the world an antinomy that coexists with him.
Thank you so much for leaving us with those words, that wisdom. And I want to invite Cesar now to share a poem to add more words and wisdom as we close this out and open it up to the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Vero, and thank you, panelists. It's been phenomenal. And earlier you had asked Carlos about how do we bring this into the classroom. And so I thought about that. I have it in big font because my eyes are shot. And so it's a love letter to teachers from our ancestors. We have been waiting for you in the place where your voice rises before the lesson begins. You don't come from 20-foot borders, but invisible 21-foot ladders carried on the backs of grandmothers who memorized the stars when maps were stolen, who grew corn in exile, who whispered mathematics into lullabies so the children would never stop counting what was theirs. You are those children. You are still counting. We are the scribes of Kemet, the engineers of Chichen Itza, the farmers who knew that milpa is not a crop, but a covenant. 3 sisters planted together because no one grows alone. This is both science and ecology. Take your students to the soil. Let them feel homeostasis in their hands, the body knowing to balance, the way a garden knows to heal. Teach them that the Mayans calculated 0, that Kemetic physicians practice surgery, that the same intelligence that aligns the pyramids of Orion lives in the child who hasn't been asked the right question yet. Ask it. We see you standing in a room where they have taken the books, where they have sent away the neighbors, where ICE has knocked down the door of a student who came back anyway because you were there, because something in them knew you were worth the risk. That is not small. That is everything. We see you when the policy memo arrives declaring diversity illegal, and you close the door and you teach it anyway. Not as defiance for its own sake, but because truth cannot be banned. Do not give up. This world is asking you to remember your original purpose. You carry it in your DNA. Encode it not as wound alone, but as wisdom, as capacity, as the ability to bend without breaking, to know when the storm is coming because your blood remembers the last one and you survived it. Tell them the Zapatistas grew milpa in resistance. Tell them the Black Panthers ran free breakfast before the government admitted children cannot learn when they're hungry. Tell them the young lords turned vacant lots into community gardens, and that the land always remembers who loved it and who abused it. We are not asking you to be superhuman. We're asking you to be ancestral, which means asking you to rest when your body says rest, to grieve what has been taken, to let the loss be real so the resistance can also be real. In the old tongue, before the test was standardized, before the curriculum was sanitized of every face that looked like yours, there were teachers. They stood in the center of the village. They drew circles in the dirt, called it cosmology. They watched the children watching the stars, called it astronomy. You are their continuation. Practice that original pedagogy, the one before the school was built and after the building is gone. We love you. We have always loved you. And we're asking you to love yourself enough to remember that you are not fighting alone. That behind you in the long procession of those who taught in the dark, there are 10,000 teachers who never had a building, a salary, a credential, except the one written in their hands and their refusal to stop. We are because you are. Thank you for what you're about to do. Go teach. And if you have to use AI, tap in to the ancestral intelligence within. Gracias.
I got it.
Thank you for that blessing, Cesar. We have time for one question. All right.
I jumped on that. First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you. This is the first time I feel like I've been in a session that has acknowledged where we are in the world, where we have acknowledged where we are as people of color. Viva Palestina, Sudan, Congo, everywhere. And I want to announce my name, Olubunmi Miolufemi. I'm a daughter of a Yoruba man from Ondo and a woman from the mountains of Miraguan in Haiti. So because I was raised in the United States and I do not know the languages of either of my parents, I have been cut off from a lot of my ancestral knowledge. And one thing, I've been going to a lot of sessions about AI at this conference, and I'm impatient, so we might not be there yet, but what I want to know is, how are you concretely using AI to maintain ancestral knowledge? Are there specific programs? How are you training the machine? And I apologize, I came in late, so if I missed this, it's a bit of a repeat. But what I'm not getting is, how are we teaching the algorithm? What are the programs you all are using? Is there something I can look at and take back and say, here is a great example of the marriage between ancestral knowledge and AI? So that's my question.
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you for being here. I will jump in to say that our organization, Bilingual Generation, we're starting to build an app that supports heritage language preservation, kind of that return, that connection to language and community. And while we don't have AI integrated into the app just yet, we do have the digitization of certain aspects that facilitate human-to-human connection. So we have like community cards there to build oracy and language and family memory. And one of the things that we're thinking of doing in the future is building what we call like a Billy Buddy, where right now there are language voice recognition tools that are used with students for reading fluency. And there are a lot of challenges with that in terms of it not accurately recognizing accents, maybe having only a certain type of Spanish or English or French or whatever the language is, that type of it, and not all the variations that come with it. So we were thinking about using an Billy Buddy AI agent to facilitate conversations between people, human-to-human connection. So I don't have an answer to that yet, but I think the promise of AI is what Shauna was talking about in terms of helping us remember, but also helping us connect to the people in front of us, to the relationships that we have, because language is about connection. Language is about community. And so that's our approach. I don't know, Shauna, if you have a perspective on it as well.
Yeah, thanks, Vero. So one of the things that I'm building is a video game that teaches higher order mathematics through episodes of Global Black History. And so every episode of the game is set in an ancestral wisdom that we hope that not only is divulged to students, but they have the opportunity to live and solve problems in that situated moment, and hopefully develop a new narrative, an identity of self from being able to engage in that way. And then I think beyond that, because you asked about what we're doing to attend to kind of some of the bias in the model that can be harmful to children, one of the things that we're also building is a middleware. It's called a RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation System. And it essentially it will intercept bias that's specific to Black children in conceptually learning math, and prevent that from filtering through any learning tools. I won't bore you with the specifics of how that works. I'll just say that one piece that's really critical is that the way the filter should work, and the way ours will work, is that it introduces a different data set. So it's curated with the truth that Cesar put so beautifully, so that when the model is checking against whether or not its output is accurate, it will have to check against what we have said about ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any last words, Carlos or Cesar, as we close out today?
Yeah, I think I will just kind of restate what I shared at the opening around the importance of us not allowing the AI narrative to be built and designed for us, right? And for us to lean into it and remember that it is the narratives that we speak out loud, that we talk about what technology is and the role that it plays, that starts to become truth once we continue to stay there. And we need to start talking about it a lot more responsibly, and then also inviting educators and folks into the design and the conversations on how to use it responsibly.
Thank you.
And just last thoughts, empires do fall. And I think that as Iran is being bombed, as Palestina is being destroyed, as Cuba is being starved, as Ecuador is being bombed, so much is happening on our world, but be not afraid to the point of paralysis. I think study the movement leaders throughout history, study how changes happen, build community, build places of resistance, and we were born for a time such as this. Patriarchs come and go, and presidents that try to be puppeteers of empire come and go. But I think we have to build the resistance, build the movement, value books, value knowledge, really spread ancestral intelligence. Don't give up. And when you do, would you please listen to some Harriet Tubman and imagine what she would tell you when she went north and went south. And so stop giving credence to empire. They say whatever you give oxygen to grows. So give oxygen to freedom, to movement and liberation, and we shall be free.
Thank you. And we will end on that note of freedom. It has been a pleasure to do this live recording of Talking to Grandma with you all here in the room and with the folks at home. If you haven't already, please follow, like, and subscribe to the Talking to Grandma podcast. And we are out. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you liked what you heard, take a minute to share this podcast with a friend or colleague. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews help us to keep the podcast lights on. We can't do this without your support. Every subscription, share, follow, download, and review makes a big difference and helps others find our show. Also, we love hearing from you. Tell us what you think of the podcast. Email us at hello@bilingualgeneration.com. You can also slide into our DMs on Instagram at Talking to Grandma. If you are interested in learning more about our workshops and curricular tools for schools serving multilingual and emerging multilingual students, visit our website at www.bilingualgeneration.com or write us at hello@bilingualgeneration.com. Talking to Grandma is owned by Bilingual Generation. Rebecca De Leon is our editor and producer. The artwork for Talking to Grandma was created by Nancy Guevara, and I'm your host, Dr. Veronica Benavides. See you next episode.